Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, January 8, 2026. The Senate advances a War Powers Act resolution prohibiting President Donald Trump from taking future military action against Venezuela without congressional approval. Minnesota's government says it has been told it will no longer take part in the federal investigation of the fatal shooting of a woman in Minneapolis by an ICE agent. Will get reaction from Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota and the White House. House passes a 3-year extension of expired Affordable Care Act health insurance enhanced premium subsidies and passes 3 more fiscal year 2026 federal spending bills designed to avoid another government shutdown at the end of the month. The House sustains presidential vetoes of 2 bipartisan bills, one to fund a water project in Colorado, the other to expand the lands of an Indian tribe in Florida. Critics say those vetoes were more about political retribution. California Governor Gavin Newsom delivers his final State of the State address, contrasting his state with the Trump administration. White House presents plans for the president's proposed ballroom to the National Capital Planning Commission, and Congressman Steny Hoyer, Democrat of Maryland, announces his retirement after more than 4 decades in the House. NBC News writing the Senate fired a warning shot at President Donald Trump, voting Thursday to advance a bipartisan resolution to block him from using military force, quote, within or against Venezuela, unless he gets prior approval from Congress. The vote of 52-47 on the War Powers measure comes after an unsuccessful plea by Republican leaders to sink it and preserve Trump's authority as he threatens a, quote, second wave of attacks on Venezuela. Trump has declared that the U.S. would run the country temporarily after he ordered a military operation last week to capture and extradite leader Nicolas Maduro. 5 Republicans joined all 47 Democrats in voting yes on the motion to advance the resolution to the Senate floor. That was from NBC News. Here's some of the Senate floor debate before that vote. Adam Schiff is a Democrat from California.
This was no more about democracy than it was about drugs. It was about oil. Just yesterday, the Secretary of Energy said that the United States intended to maintain significant control over Venezuela's oil industry, including by overseeing the sale of the country's production indefinitely. Indefinitely. And Donald Trump has promised to use the revenue from these oil sales to create a fund that he would control. He's literally meeting with oil executives on Friday to try to divide up the spoils of this military campaign. Now, some of my colleagues may believe that using the U.S. military to depose Nicolas Maduro and seize Venezuela's oil is well worth the risk to our troops and the danger of becoming mired down in that country. I disagree, but if that was the case, let them seek an authorization from Congress to do so. We have so many urgent problems that need addressing here at home. With life barely affordable for millions of Americans and the cost of living rising, with people struggling to cover the rent, with families barely able to afford the cost of groceries, to say nothing of the skyrocketing healthcare costs. But now, instead of putting Americans first, we are stepping into a foreign nation and promising to run it for the foreseeable future. An administration that had promised to end foreign wars has begun a new one. A president who had decried the use of force for regime change or to engage in nation building has just committed our country to both. No doubt Russia and China see opportunity in this American about-face. Russia to indict Ukrainian leaders and to seize them, and China to do the same in Taiwan. We are not only at risk of reestablishing the idea that might makes right and military conquest is acceptable in your sphere of influence, but the very real prospect of destabilizing a world order post-World War II that has made us safer and more prosperous. Now, when it comes to Congress's role in checking this president, in asserting its war powers given to us by our founders and the framers of our Constitution, if we do not assert this power, we will lose it, and not just to constrain this president, but any president, and for all time.
Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, on the Senate floor. Senator Jim Risch, Republican from Idaho, chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, spoke against the resolution.
There isn't anybody that has any information that the president is using armed forces against Venezuela. He did for about 47 minutes this last weekend, but he is not in the process of doing this. And the resolution says that he should stop it. He's not doing it. Now, if the resolution were drawn to say, President, you can't do this anymore, that would actually have some effect, or attempt to have some effect. It would be unconstitutional, unenforceable. But to tell him to not do something or to stop doing something he's not doing is nonsense. The effect of this is to slap the President of the United States in the face. That is the only effect that this vote can have. It can have no practical effect because it's trying to stop something that isn't going on. So, we are again here considering this War Powers Resolution to remove the troops from a foreign country where they do not exist. The War Powers Act was created as a way to address the continuing deployment of U.S. forces into hostilities or in hostilities. There is no continuing deployment of U.S. forces in hostilities. The War Powers Act was never designed to remove the President's Article II right to defend the United States, its interests, or its citizens, and nor indeed could the War Powers Act do that, because the Constitution absolutely directs the President of the United States to use the military might of the United States to protect it. Indeed, the constitutional power is given to the President. We cannot change that. It is the power that he has. This vote and similar votes before it are an abuse of the War Powers Act. There are no U.S. military forces in Venezuela. The United States conducted a limited operation that removed an indicted narco-terrorist, Nicolas Maduro, from Venezuela and brought him to the United States to face justice for his crimes. Now, was this a good thing to do? Well, of course it was a good thing to do, and indeed, Democrats themselves have said that it was a good thing to do.
Senator Jim Risch, Republican from Idaho, chair of the Foreign Relations Committee on the Senate floor. The Senate voted 52-47 to advance the War Powers Act resolution that would block future military action against Venezuela without congressional approval. President Donald Trump then writing on Truth Social, Republicans should be ashamed of the senators that just voted with Democrats in attempting to take away our powers to fight and defend the United States of America. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Rand Paul, Josh Hawley, and Todd Young should never be elected to office again. The vote greatly hampers American self-defense and national security, impeding the president's authority as commander-in-chief. In any event, and despite their, quote, stupidity, the War Powers Act is unconstitutional, totally violating Article 2 of the Constitution, as all presidents and their departments of justice have determined before me. Nevertheless, a more important Senate vote will be taking place next week on this very subject. That post from President Donald Trump, and today's motion was to discharge the resolution from committee, making it the pending business on the Senate floor. There are more steps to go before final passage. That could happen next week, and even if it did pass the Senate and then pass the House, it could still be vetoed by President Trump. Vice President J.D. Vance was asked about today's vote in the Senate at a White House news conference.
Mr. Vice President, even beyond the War Powers resolution today, Congress has bucked President Trump on issues like tariffs. Are you concerned that President Trump is losing his grip on Republicans in the Congress, and what are you going to do about it?
No, I'm not concerned at all. First of all, we talked to some of the senators who are going to vote the wrong way, in my view, on this resolution today. Much of their argument was based more on a legal technicality than any disagreement in policy. If you look at the people who actually voted, every single one of them have supported the administration's plan. Second of all, as the president, I believe himself, has already said, every president, Democrat or Republican, believes the War Powers Act is fundamentally a fake and unconstitutional law. It's not going to change anything about how we conduct foreign policy over the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, and that'll continue to be how we approach things. Go ahead.
Vice President J.D. Vance at a White House news conference. And in the House, Congressman Jim McGovern, Democrat of Connecticut, who has called the recent U.S. military operation in Venezuela illegal, has introduced a companion Venezuela War Powers resolution and has urged House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, to bring it to the floor for a vote. Associated Press reporting today that Venezuela will release a significant number of Venezuelan and foreigners imprisoned in the country. The head of Venezuela's National Assembly said Thursday. Jorge Rodriguez, brother of the acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, did not specify who they would be releasing or how many people would be released. Rodriguez said in an announcement publicized over TV, consider this gesture by the Bolivarian government, which is broadly intended to seek peace. That from AP, and this is Washington Today. Another AP article, the head of Minnesota's State Investigations Agency says the U.S. Attorney's Office has cut off its access in the fatal shooting of a Minneapolis woman by an ICE agent. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Superintendent Drew Ebbins said in a statement the investigation would now be led solely by the FBI, and the BCA would no longer have access to the case materials, scene evidence, or investigative interviews necessary to complete a thorough and independent investigation. That was from AP. U.S. Homeland Security Department Secretary Kristi Noem answered reporters' questions about this at a news conference at ICE headquarters in New York City.
The head of Minnesota State Investigations Agency said that they had been cut out of the investigation into the fatal shooting in Minneapolis. Can you explain that reversal?
I'd like to know where they've been and why they're not out on the streets investigating all of these people that are harassing and inciting violence on law enforcement officers right now. They're allowing the situation to be volatile. They're not doing their work. They haven't for years, and maybe they should get to work a little bit on the unprecedented fraud that we've seen in Minnesota and in Minneapolis by people that stole from American citizens and diverted funds away from vulnerable people and programs and services that they needed and put it into their own pockets. Minnesota is a train wreck. It is corrupt, and it was under the leadership of Governor Walz and this mayor that they allowed it to happen, and they let criminals and illegals and people abuse programs and steal the money, and now they're allowing violence to go forward on the streets as well.
This also applies to the Minneapolis Police Department, county sheriffs, the federal authorities at this point, they don't want.
I won't put a blanket statement out like those other individuals will. What I would say is I welcome them to come and help us. Come help us make sure that the streets are safe, that laws are enforced, and that we can do the right thing to make sure that American citizens come first. Yes, sir. They have not been cut out. They don't have any jurisdiction in this investigation.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem at a news conference in New York City, WABC TV reporting that she came to New York to announce the apprehension of 54 people authorities said were loosely affiliated with the Trinitarios street gang and undocumented immigrants, 2 of whom she linked to the summertime shooting of an off-duty Customs and Border Protection officer who was wounded in the wrist and face. That was from WABC TV, and she took questions, though, on what was happening in Minneapolis. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat, spoke at a news conference today in Minneapolis about the investigation of the shooting death of Renee Good by an ICE agent in that city on Wednesday.
People who are not by inclination trusting of law enforcement or government have come to see the professionals at the BCA as true arbitrators that can get them justice. The unit is the result of years of scrutiny, public engagement, and bipartisan legislative action. Minnesotans have made it clear time and again they expect transparency through this process where a police officer uses deadly force. The BCA, Commissioner, Superintendent Evans, have earned that trust by delivering on that expectation. I think it's clear to everyone as they saw this that it feels now that Minnesota has been taken out of the investigation. It feels very, very difficult that we will get a fair outcome. And I say that only because people in positions of power have already passed judgment, from the president to the vice president to Kristi Noem, have stood and told you things that are verifiably false, verifiably inaccurate. They have determined the character of a 37-year-old mom that they didn't even know, don't know. They've determined that the actions are done. I don't know. I've not used inflammatory terms of what happened. I've asked us to find the answers. The only way we find the answers is a thorough investigation by nonpartisan professionals. We've delivered that. We've been able to do it. We've earned the trust. And when I say that, the trust of BCA, and I tell Minnesotans the trust of law enforcement here.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat, at a news conference today in Minneapolis. New York Times writing that Vice President J.D. Vance repeated baseless claims that Renee Nicole Good, the woman shot and killed by an ICE agent in Minnesota, was part of a broader left-wing network that used domestic terror techniques to target federal agents. During his appearance at the White House news conference, he reiterated the Trump administration line, which has been disputed by Minnesota state officials, that she was trying to ram the agent with her car before she was shot. That was the article from the New York Times. Here's the vice president at the White House briefing.
Is there a risk with you describing her as a deranged leftist, talking about very specific facts of these events, when an investigation is just beginning? Are you preempting a thorough investigation by drawing such conclusions? And have you received any information beyond the videos we've seen publicly about this individual, her specific acts, that has informed your point of view?
Well, first of all, the Department of Justice is going to investigate this. The Department of Homeland Security is already investigating this. But the simple fact is, what you see is what you get in this case. You have a woman who is trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. Nobody debates that. You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator. Nobody debates that. I can believe that her death is a tragedy, while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making and a tragedy of the far left, who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe, against our law enforcement officers. I think what is clearly happening here, and it's going to keep on happening unless the Democrats wake up and say, you know what, you don't have to agree with our immigration policies. You don't have to agree with what the president or the vice president believe about immigration enforcement, but why don't you take this to the ballot box? Why don't you vote? Why don't you organize? Instead, what some of them are doing is encouraging people to get violent with our law enforcement officials. It's disgraceful, and it's got to stop.
Vice President J.D. Vance at a White House news conference. On Capitol Hill, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, both Democrats from New York, got questions about their party's reaction to the ICE agent shooting in Minnesota.
Some of your colleagues are threatening to shut down the government right now over the fatal shooting in Minneapolis. Given the fact that we saw the government shut down over these subsidies, I mean, is this a road that Democrats now want to walk down again?
The Appropriations Committee, and particularly the committees on Homeland Security, are taking up this issue, and they will have a very important and serious discussion about it. You're next.
So, given that you said that they're going to be taking up the appropriations process, if Democrats take back the House or Senate, will they do anything to slash funding for ICE or hold ICE accountable for these fatal shootings? There are multiple shootings, not just what happened to Renee Good.
Let me first say that the killing of Renee Nicole Good was an abomination, a disgrace. And blood is clearly on the hands of those individuals within the administration who've been pushing an extreme policy that has nothing to do with immigration enforcement connected to removing violent felons from this country. We support the removal of violent felons from this country who are here illegally. But that's not what this administration has been doing under the so-called leadership of Kristi Noem, who's a stone-cold liar. There's no evidence at all that this was a justified shooting. So let's deal with the tragedy right now. She hasn't even been buried. Her family is grieving. She was a single mom and an American citizen. And we all are outraged by what took place in Minneapolis, and we will respond decisively.
Go ahead. And I just want to, I watched the video. You felt like your stomach was being punched. Looking at the video, there seemed no justification for what these agents did. There needs to be a full investigation at the federal level, although I have little faith in the FBI at doing a fair investigation, or DHS, but at the local level as well.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer at a news conference with the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. They're both Democrats from New York. Associated Press reporting from Minneapolis, dozens of protesters gathered Thursday outside of a federal building on the edge of Minneapolis that is serving as a major base for the immigration crackdown. They shouted, "No more ICE, go home Nazis, quit your job, and justice now," as Border Patrol officers pushed them back from the gate, doused them with pepper spray, and fired tear gas. And CNN writing that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has authorized the state's National Guard to help support local law enforcement as tensions have risen in Minneapolis following the fatal shooting of Renee Good. National Guard will help protect critical infrastructure and maintain public safety, a news release from Walz's office said. This is Washington Today. The House of Representatives today passed a 3-year extension of the expired enhanced health insurance premium subsidies of the Affordable Care Act. NPR writes the extension is expected to pass the House, but it may not go far in the Senate, where a similar measure failed in December, and a bipartisan group of senators say they are close to a deal on a compromise bill for the Affordable Care Act subsidies. That was from NPR. Here's part of the House floor debate before the vote on passage. Congresswoman Catherine Clark, Democrat of Massachusetts, is the minority whip.
Today, thanks to the persistence of the American people, because millions of constituents have called their members of Congress, shown up at town halls, shown up and marched in the streets, because of parents who spoke out for their kids, for doctors who spoke out for their patients, neighbors who mobilized together. Today, we have a chance to vote for Americans' health care. And today, thanks to the strength and unity of our Democratic caucus, the House will vote to restore the ACA tax credits. We will vote to restore the affordable marketplace plans that working people depend on to stay healthy, to live, to survive. Today, we will vote to prioritize the lives of regular people over the greed of billionaires and start bringing the Republican healthcare crisis to an end. This vote won't solve every problem the GOP has created. We still have to reverse their cuts to Medicaid and Medicare, to stop the closure of rural hospitals and deal with the maternity health crisis, and work together, yes, work together to create a healthcare system that is affordable and accessible to everyone. But today we can begin. Today, the People's House has a chance to stand with and for the people. I hope we have a strong bipartisan majority for this vote and that the Senate will immediately do the same.
Congresswoman Catherine Clark, Democrat of Massachusetts, the minority whip on the House floor, speaking against this bill, the 3-year extension of the expired enhanced health insurance premium tax credits of the Affordable Care Act. Congressman Aaron Bean, Republican of Florida.
If you're just tuning in, America, to C-SPAN, you might assume that Republicans are eliminating the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare altogether. Simply not the case. The premium tax credits that were developed during COVID to subsidize Americans making more than 400% of the federal poverty level, including those making more, up to $600,000. Up to $600,000 are getting subsidized by the American taxpayers. In Northeast Florida, we call people making $600,000 rich. And that's who we're subsidizing with these and premium tax credits. I've also got a news flash for you, Mr. Speaker. COVID is over. We made these premium tax credits during COVID. COVID's over, and these subsidies should be over with it. But Obamacare will continue for those who need it. Americans making up to 400% of the poverty level are still eligible for the tax cuts. At this very moment, that's still happening. That means a family of 4 can make up to $128,000 and still qualify for help. So to call this, and I've heard it said a couple of times already, to call this a Republican health care crisis is fake news. There is new hope, Mr. Speaker. Instead of throwing more money away, we can have a new day for America to look at health savings account, to look at the lower health care premiums for all act that, according to the CBO, are going to lower premiums for everybody, all Americans across the nation. It's time to give more choice and more competition. Those are the only ingredients that are going to make costs lower. We can't keep passing the same roof. Everybody has sticker shock, Mr. Chairman. I urge everybody, the right answer is to vote no on extending these horrible tax credits.
Congressman Aaron Bean, Republican of Florida, on the House floor. The House passed this bill by a vote of 230 to 136, 17 Republicans joining Democrats in the majority of voting yes, sending the bill to the Senate. But as was mentioned, it's unlikely to pass there in its current form, although a bipartisan group of senators is working on a health care reform bill they say can pass, and some of them are telling the media a deal is close. Politico writes the House passed 3 government spending bills Thursday, inching Congress closer to funding federal operations ahead of the January 30th deadline to avoid a shutdown. The measures would fund the Departments of Energy, Commerce, Interior, and Justice, as well as water programs, the EPA, and federal science initiatives through the end of the current fiscal year. More than 75% of government programs still need to be funded. That was from Politico. Here is some of the floor debate on that package. Congressman Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma, chairs the Appropriations Committee.
I rise today in support of H.R. 6938, a 3-bill package covering the Commerce, Justice, Science, Energy and Water Development, and Interior and Environment appropriations measures for fiscal year 2026. These bills are the product of bipartisan, bicameral consensus and are grounded in a member-driven process. As I stand here today, I think of the genius of our founding fathers. They designed Congress to be an engine of thoughtful and deliberative policymaking. It wasn't meant to be easy. In fact, difficulty is what separates serious legislating from political performance. In her 250 years, America has never shied away from hard work, nor does the Appropriations Committee in carrying out our constitutional responsibilities for fiscal year 2026. Even after the longest government shutdown in history, political obstruction, and tough deadlines, we remained resolute and took responsible steps forward to restore regular order. I'm proud to say we've ended the cycle of pork-filled omnibuses decided at the last minute. And just as importantly, we've been turning America First priorities into action. President Trump set a critical foundation by signing 3 appropriation bills into law in November, and we're carrying that momentum forward today. The measure before us keeps us on track to complete all 12 appropriations bills for fiscal year 2026. With the passage of these 3 bills, we will provide full-year funding for many of our most critical programs. We prioritize public safety by supporting law enforcement and stopping the flow of fentanyl into our communities. We advance American strength by unleashing energy dominance, securing critical minerals, and investing in nuclear power. And we uphold stewardship by protecting public lands, supporting wildlife fires, ensuring responsible resource management, and fulfilling our obligations to our tribal nations. All of this is achieved while cutting waste and keeping total FY26 spending below the current continuing resolution.
Congressman Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma, chaired the Appropriations Committee on the House floor. The ranking member of the committee, Democrat Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut, also supported the spending package.
When we began this process, we set out 3 goals: to protect democratic priorities, to eliminate any poison pills, and to reassert Congress's power of the purse. I am pleased to report that this package accomplishes all 3. It protects funding for key democratic priorities and rejects draconian cuts proposed by the Trump administration. It invests in programs at the Department of Energy that will bring down energy costs and utility bills, which are core drivers of the ongoing affordability crisis programs that President Trump proposed to cut or eliminate, despite the cost of living crisis he has led us into. This package promotes community safety, increasing funding for Violence Against Women Act grants by $7 million, supporting victims of abuse who otherwise would have nowhere to turn. It rejects efforts by the Trump administration to eviscerate scientific research funding, providing $4.8 billion more for the National Science Foundation than the White House proposed. The agreement also rejects the Office of Management and Budget's illegal efforts to undermine America's dominance in scientific innovation across the entire government by protecting the indirect costs that research institutions depend on to do groundbreaking work with the Department of Energy, NASA, and the National Science Foundation. This is something Chairman Cole and I have worked on in the past with regard to the NIH, and it is critical for us to expand it to other agencies in this package. The bill provides funding to protect our national parks, natural resources, endangered species, and public lands, rejecting $9.5 billion in proposed cuts in the Interior bill. And it protects our environment while restraining polluters, providing $8.8 billion in funding for the EPA, nearly double the budget proposed by the White House. Additionally, there is not a single poison pill policy rider in this bill, and I know my friend and chairman and I may disagree on what constitutes a poison pill, but it is a testament to the good faith of these negotiations that both sides agreed to drop provisions the other found truly objectionable. I know some of my Democratic colleagues may be reticent to support a funding package for an administration that has been rife with abuse since the day they took office. I understand your concerns, and I share them, but abandoning the appropriations process only empowers the President and the Office of Management and Budget to continue manipulating federal spending as a partisan weapon. If we give up on appropriations, there are only two alternatives: a permanent shutdown or endless stopgaps with funding on autopilot. Neither are viable options.
Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Democrat from Connecticut, ranking member on the Appropriations Committee, today on the House floor. Politico reporting on how the votes turned out on this 3 spending bill package. It actually starts yesterday on the rules for debate, and they write a dozen Republican fiscal hawks prepared to vote no on the rule unless leadership agreed to remove certain earmarks from the underlying package and promised to revamp the earmarks process surrounding future spending bills. To quell the rebellion, a plan was hatched to split up the package and accommodate 2 separate votes, one on the Commerce, Justice, Science bill, where discontent over certain earmarks couldn't be resolved, and another on the Interior, Environment, and Energy Water bills coupled together. This maneuver allowed hardliners to register their opposition to the Commerce, Justice, Science measure, but still support the others. And so the House today voted on the Commerce, Justice, Science, 375 to 47, with 3 dozen Republicans opposing. And the Interior, EPA, and Energy Water measures together was 419 to 6. And then a third vote on the final passage of everything, 397 to 28, sending it over to the Senate. Politico also writes members of both parties also agreed to nix one particularly controversial $1 million earmark sought by Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Democrat from Minnesota, for a program in her district. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Hello, political junkies. Searching for new and original political stories without political bias? Well, search no more, because, wow, does C-SPAN have just the place for you? The new Extreme Wortman podcast. Every week, hear compelling clips straight from the C-SPAN archives. Iconic, obscure, and everything in between. Inspired by real-life events happening right now. Find Extreme Wortman wherever you get podcasts.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Story from The Hill. The House on Thursday failed to override President Trump's vetoes of 2 previously uncontroversial bills concerning a Colorado water project and expanding lands of a tribe in Florida. The Hill says the move showcases House Republicans' loyalty to the president and support for his political battles, as the vetoes had been seen as a means of Trump acting on political grudges. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, Republican from Colorado, spoke on the House floor before the vote on her bill dealing with the water project.
Contrary to what the veto message states, my bill does not authorize any additional federal funding. It simply modifies the repayment terms for small rural communities in my district so they are able to afford their 35% cost share of the project that they are statutorily obligated to repay. After the project broke ground, inflation took place. It doubled under the previous administration, and the price tag of this project due to construction and labor costs. Once completed, the Arkansas Valley Conduit will provide 7,500 acre-feet of water per year to as many as 50,000 Coloradans across 40 different communities in Pueblo, Otero, Bent, Kiowa, Prowers, Crowley, and Baca counties. I want to boldly remind my colleagues here today that this project broke ground during the first Trump administration in 2020 due to major investments from the Trump-led Bureau of Reclamation and the state of Colorado. From 1962 until 2020, only $24 million had been invested in this project. In 2020, President Trump and his team, his administration, did the right thing, continuing with their commitment to improve Western water infrastructure. He more than doubled the federal investments in this project with $28 million going towards it. The state of Colorado then invested over $100 million in this project.
Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, Republican from Colorado, on the House floor. There was only one speaker on the other side of this debate, a Republican, Bruce Westerman of Arkansas, chair of the Natural Resources Committee.
H.R. 131 passed the House Committee on Natural Resources and then the House of Representatives on July 2025. However, President Trump has returned H.R. 131 to the House of Representatives without his approval. I respect the administration's views on this legislation and its commitment to fiscal responsibility. President Trump's record demonstrates a commitment to prioritizing unleashing abundant water supplies across the West.
Congressman Bruce Westerman on the House floor before the House voted to sustain the president's veto of this bill and another one that gives an Indian tribe in Florida more control over the Everglades. The vote on the Colorado bill was 248 to 177, with one voting present. That's Nancy Mace, Republican of South Carolina. And on the Florida bill, it was 236 to 188, in both cases short of the two-thirds vote needed to override a presidential veto. More from the Hill article. President Trump has targeted Colorado over prosecution of former Mesa County elections clerk Tina Peters, who aligned with Trump's claims of fraud in the 2020 election. Many observers see the veto as part of that political retribution. And Congresswoman Boebert also suggested that Trump's veto could be political retribution against her for being one of 4 Republicans to sign a discharge petition, forcing a vote directing the Department of Justice to release files about the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. On the bill granting the Florida tribe authority to manage part of the Everglades, Trump, in his veto statement, said the tribe had actively sought to obstruct reasonable immigration policies the American people voted for. That was from The Hill. Vice President J.D. Vance said at a White House news conference today the Justice Department will create a new Assistant Attorney General position to focus on welfare fraud after the scandal in Minnesota. He said there are similar fraud operations going on in Ohio and California that need looking into. The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke today at the Economic Club of Minnesota in Golden Valley, a suburb of Minneapolis, and talked about the investigation of fraud in that state.
Minnesota, unfortunately, is ground zero for what may be one of the most egregious welfare scams in our nation's history to date. Under Governor Tim Walz, billions of dollars intended for families in need, housing for disabled seniors, and services for children were diverted to benefit fraudsters. I am here this week to signal the U.S. Treasury's unwavering commitment to recovering stolen funds, prosecuting fraudulent criminals, preventing scandals like this from ever happening again, and investigating similar schemes state by state. Taken together, President Trump's policies have delivered a historic economic comeback in record time. Where the previous administration created stagflation and privation, this president has unleashed investment, innovation, and rising incomes. The result is an American economy that is stronger, more resilient, and more affordable for working families. With capital flowing, productivity surging, and prices easing, the stage is set for a robust, non-inflationary growth in 2026. The Trump economy is back, and its best days are still ahead. President Trump has charted the course for economic renewal. Now it's up to individual states to follow it. Minnesota should lead the way. For 4 years under Biden, Minnesotans had a president who prioritized punishment over partnerships in his dealings with the business community. This is no longer the case under this administration. President Trump is the best partner an American job creator could ever have. That's why he's prioritized low taxes as well as a safe and sound light touch approach to regulation. Our president has restored tax and trade certainty, making this the best decade in a generation to build a business. So come build with us.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent at the Economic Club of Minnesota today. He also announced that the 2026 tax filing season begins on January 26th. That's when the IRS will begin accepting and processing 2025 tax returns. Of course, the filing deadline is April 15th. Wall Street today, the Dow up 270, NASDAQ down 104, and S&P up a fraction. New York Times writing, President Trump announced on Wednesday that he is withdrawing the United States from the bedrock international agreement that forms the basis for countries to rein in climate change. The treaty, which has been in place for 34 years, counts all of the other nations of the world as members. In a social media post, the White House announced that Mr. Trump signed a presidential memorandum that pulls the U.S. from the Climate Pact and 65 other international organizations and treaties that, quote, no longer serve American interests. About half of those are United Nations organizations. That was from the New York Times. Sacramento Bee in California, writing in his final State of the State address, Governor Gavin Newsom touted California's economic dominance and a modest reduction in the unsheltered homeless population, claiming victory on one of his most potent political liabilities. The governor, whose term ends when the newly elected governor is inaugurated in early January 2027, positioned California as a liberal, stable counterweight to the, quote, chaotic and lawless White House, which he claimed had been captured by wealth, emphasizing President Donald Trump's profiteering. Some of the reporting from the Sacramento Bee. Here's part of the State of the State address.
The federal government, respectfully, it's unrecognizable, protecting the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. Their credo seems to be about fear, fear of the future, fear of the stranger, fear of change. In Washington, the president believes that might makes right, that the courts are simply speed bumps, not stop signs, that democracy is a nuisance to be circumvented, secret police, businesses being raided, windows smashed, citizens detained, citizens shot, masked men snatching people in broad daylight, people disappearing, using American cities as training grounds for the United States military, purposeful chaos emanating from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, shifting a tax burden from the wealthy, from billionaires to small businesses, ranchers, farmers, and the middle class, lining the pockets of the rich, crony capitalism at unimaginable scale, state capitalism, self-dealing, profit-making, not policy-making, rolling back rights of marginalized communities, rewriting history, censoring historical facts. Their politics, some politics of some twisted nostalgia about restoring the dynamics of a bygone era. None of this is normal.
Governor Gavin Newsom, Democrat of California, delivering his State of the State address in Sacramento, his final one as governor, as 2026 will finish out his second four-year term, and he is term limited. The White House today presented its plans for President Trump's proposed White House ballroom, officially called the East Wing Modernization Project, at the monthly meeting of the National Capital Planning Commission. AP writes this comes months after the East Wing was demolished in preparation for the construction, and the commission is one of two federal panels that review construction on federal land, usually before ground is broken. Commissioner Michael Blair, who is also the current Deputy White House Chief of Staff, expressed support for the project.
I think Winston Churchill said to the House of Commons when they were going to rebuild it that we shape our buildings and then they shape us thereafter. The White House is a special place, but people come there to gather and to work. I would tell you that we've seen times where simply doing something like getting the Congress together to have a meal and break bread is not something that the current structure of the White House really accommodates in any way with the President of the United States. That's a problem. When foreign dignitaries visit, the President of the United States of any party invited all over the world and goes and gets to see the best of whatever the country has to offer. And I think the president's view would be that he thinks the American people deserve that same opportunity to have grand gatherings for visitors to our country and show them what America has to offer. So I think it has obvious utility. I think it's very considered in its design. And I look forward to seeing the progress of the project and appreciate your presentation and look forward to working with you.
Commissioner Michael Blair at today's meeting of the National Capital Planning Commission. Commissioner Phil Mendelson, who is the Washington, D.C. City Council Chair, a Democrat, also gave his views on the project.
I think that the elevation we saw from Pennsylvania Avenue was not as disturbing to me as the elevation from the ellipse. And as I said in my questions, I'm concerned about this addition overwhelming the original historic building. I appreciate that the architectural apparatus has really good taste with regard to dealing with historic structures, but I do think that it sounds to me like the height could be lowered without jeopardizing the footprint. I don't think that the footprint, that is 89,000 square feet, should be the goal in and of itself. So maybe it can be and needs to be shrunk a little bit more. Again, looking at the elevations from the south, it's just so imbalanced. The other observation I have is that it is disturbing to me that we are looking at an addition to this historic structure, but we're looking at what appears to be an overall plan in a very segmented approach. So there are going to be some changes with the visitor center, there are going to be some changes with Lafayette Park, there are going to be some changes with the West Wing, but rather than looking at this as a whole, we're going to be looking at it piecemeal, and that's concerning as well.
Commissioner Phil Mendelson at today's meeting of the National Capital Planning Commission. He mentioned the architect for the White House East Wing ballroom project, Shalom Baranes. He said it's possible the White House West Wing could get an extra story in the future to match the height of the new ballroom on the East Wing, which he says will be as high as the White House itself.
And I think, the most important thing here perhaps is what I mentioned earlier, which is the alignment of the cornice of the ballroom directly aligns with the cornice and the balustrade of the White House. The heights will match exactly. Here you see the upper level of the East Colonnade, and I did mention the potential for a future addition, a one-story addition to the West Wing, and that would occur right here. And you can see that the reason to think that is so that we would reinstate the symmetry around the central pavilion of the White House. We have not looked at that at all yet, but hope to do so in the future.
Architect for the White House East Wing Ballroom project, Shalom Baranes, at today's National Capital Planning Commission meeting. He also said the project will now be 45,000 square feet. That's about half the size that the administration said it would be when it was first announced last summer. More from the Associated Press article. The first step in the review process for the East Wing Modernization project is an information presentation at which the White House outlines the project. Commissioners can ask questions and offer general feedback. A more formal review is expected in the spring, including public testimony and votes. That was from AP. Today is the 15th anniversary of the shooting at an official event held by former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, Democrat from Arizona. She was severely wounded. 6 other people died in the attack. Today, Gabby Giffords returned to the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., where she and the 6 other victims were honored with a resolution and a moment of silence. She also posted this video.
15 years ago, on January 8th, 2011, a man tried to assassinate me.
911, where's your emergency? 911, there was a shooting at Safeway where Gabby Giffords was. And I do believe Gabby Giffords was hit.
He shot me in the head point blank. He shot 19 people. He killed 6. Terrible, terrible day. I almost died. But I fought for my life, and I survived.
A few minutes after we left her room and some of her colleagues from Congress were in the room, Gabby opened her eyes for the first time.
I learned to walk again, one step at a time. I learned to talk again, one word at a time.
My name is Gavin Giffords.
So many people helped me as I worked hard to recover. I learned that people care for each other and work together progress is possible, a better world is possible.
Congress passing bipartisan legislation on gun safety.
Maine is now the 22nd state to pass a red flag law, with Maine voters sending a clear and decisive message.
Because of her, lives will be saved and America will be safer. Gabrielle Giffords.
I'm so proud of our work. I know we can end gun violence one step at a time. Let's get it done.
Former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, Democrat from Arizona, posting that video on the 15th anniversary of the attack that wounded her and killed 6 others. Baltimore Banner writing that Congressman Steny Hoyer, the longest-serving House Democrat and Dean of Maryland's federal delegation, announced his retirement from a decades-long career in Congress Thursday. An emotional Hoyer took the podium on the floor of the U.S. House to say he would not seek another term, saying his long career has had more good times than bad. The Southern Maryland politician steps down from a nearly 60-year career as an elected official, rising to key leadership positions in the Maryland General Assembly and in Congress. That was from the Baltimore Banner. Here's part of the speech from Congressman Hoyer on the floor.
I have decided not to seek another term in the People's House. I make this decision with sadness, for I love this House, an institution the framers designed to reflect the will of the American people and to serve as the guardian of their liberty and their democracy. Through the past 45 years, I have come to know many good, decent, patriotic members chosen by their neighbors to represent them. They come from both parties and all parts of the ideological spectrum. The Congress I entered in 1981 was somewhat different. Most Republicans and Democrats worked together in a collegial, productive way. The leaders of the House, Tip O'Neill and Bob Michel, fostered that environment. It was, of course, not a Congress without conflict. In the year to come, I will have much more to say about the issues we have grappled with and the ways this House has changed during my time. At the outset, I said that I spoke with reluctant conviction. That reluctance is because I am deeply concerned that this House is not living up to the founders' goals. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to examine their conscience, renew their courage, and carry out the responsibilities that the first article of the Constitution demands. Only in that way can we ensure that our 250 years will be a preface to a stronger, brighter beacon in a free and principled democracy. A nation of laws, not of men. A nation respected around the world for its strength, certainly, but even more for the ideals it represents and the justice with which it acts. That effort must extend beyond this House. I fear that America is heading not toward greatness, but toward smallness, pettiness, divisiveness, lawlessness, and disdainfulness. We must respect and love one another. We must remember that we are not great or unique because we say we're great, but because we are just, generous, and fair.
Congressman Steny Hoyer, Democrat from Maryland, on the House floor today announcing he will not run for re-election in 2026. He is 86 years old. He won a Maryland State Senate seat back in 1966 and has been in the U.S. House since his first election victory in 1980. Washington Post writing that Hoyer's list of legislative accomplishments is long, including authoring the Americans with Disabilities Act and the election law responding to the disputed 2000 presidential race. But his biggest contribution may have been serving as a cooling agent when partisan temperatures ran hot in the raucous House. Many Republicans viewed him as an honest broker and a lighter touch than Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi of California, who led the caucus for 20 years. Hoyer served as her deputy. That was from the Washington Post. Congresswoman Pelosi spoke on the House floor.
My colleagues, we all know that Steny Hoyer has been a pillar of strength for the House of Representatives and a champion for the people of Maryland for more than 4 decades. His patriotism, mastery of the legislative process, and steadfast commitment to America's working families have left an indelible positive mark on our nation. Steny has been a steady presence in our caucus and the Democratic leadership and a valued colleague. He has been a great leader in bipartisanship in this body. He spoke of it in his remarks, how it was when he came here. And it was at that time when many of us were here at that time when we didn't get along because we always agreed. We got along because we respected the differences that we brought representing our districts. And it was a very positive time which he hearkened us back to and challenged us to return to. Thank you, Steny. His deep knowledge of the institution, respect for its traditions, and commitment to public service have earned him the admiration of colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Personally, Steny has been not only a trusted partner in leadership, but a true dear friend. He mentioned the presidency of John F. Kennedy. When President Kennedy was president, Steny and I worked in the office of Danny Brewster of Maryland. That's when I got to know him. I was just out of school. He was in law school, and sadly, we saw the assassination of the president, and that was a horrible thing. As he concludes his extraordinary leadership and service in the Congress, we celebrate his legacy of decency and devotion to our country. He has been just so remarkable. Our gratitude to him and his family is boundless, and we're with them, wish them every happiness in the years ahead.
House Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, on the House floor. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Remember, the C-SPAN network's now available on Hulu Plus Live TV. Learn more at hulu.com/live TV. And for the latest on what's been going on in Washington, sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word at cspan.org. Hope you have a good night.